Hey everyone, welcome back to another video. In this one, I'm going to be taking a look at Namor, or Namor, at level 70, level 80, and T4 in all content. I was hoping to make an initial impressions video when the patch first dropped, but unfortunately I didn't really get around to doing that, so in the future I will try to make a post on Discord with my findings if I don't have enough time to make a video for it. This is likely another good reason why you should join the Discord, since I can give additional information outside of YouTube videos, and if you need help from myself or other players, there are discussions there that you can talk in, and you'll also be included for the coupon giveaways, since you need a Discord for me to be able to contact you the code. This patch has been pretty rough so far. There's been a lot of bugs and questionable balance changes to certain characters like Hulk and Black Bolt. But thankfully the devs have taken notice and are putting in some effort to basically appease the players and find a good balance between their proposed changes and the changes that the player base is accepting. The Reforged Rage CTP seems to be a work in progress, so hopefully they'll figure that out so that it's not a waste to reforge the CTP and you can actually notice a difference in more content than just 2 game modes. It's tricky though, since they need to balance that CTP to make it better when it's reforged, but not make it the clear best in all cases. This is likely difficult to do in its current state, since the Rage CTP was already really good across multiple game modes, and reforging it would make it even better, likely putting most of the CTPs at a disadvantage compared to it. However, I think the best way to approach this is to rebalance all of the CTPs instead of just focusing on the Rage CTP. That way you can make sure that they are more in line with one another and focus where to make each one excel at. Besides that, you can also tweak them so that certain CTPs aren't falling behind or almost useless, like the Patience CTP. Moving on to Namors Testing, since I had a CTP of Rage on him previously, that is what most of my testing was done with. And I have to say that with a CTP of Rage, his performance wasn't really that good, specifically in content like World Boss Legend. Since Namor doesn't really perform that well in PvP, which you'll see in a little bit, based on the testing that I did with this build and some of the other videos that I've seen online from other players, you really only have 2 options for building the character specifically for PvE, which I would advise. You can either give him a CTP of Rage, which will excel his performance in Alliance Battle Extreme and Alliance Battle Legend specifically, or you can alternatively give him a CTP of Judgment, which will make his PvE performance better for most other modes. However, his performance in Alliance Battle Extreme and Alliance Battle Legend, and to a lesser extent Giant Boss Raid, will be slightly worse. So generally speaking, if you want the character to perform more ideally across multiple PvE modes, a CTP of Judgment is more ideal. However, if you are really focused on getting a higher score in the Alliance Battle modes, then a CTP of Rage will be the better option there. You can try to make something like an Energy or Destruction work, but his 5th skill is a delay cancel, and most often you want to cancel most of his other skills before using the 3rd skill, which will likely trigger the proc early and will not allow you to ideally proc on the skill that you want. You can see from this clip that even with the guaranteed crit rate and the additional damage that this uniform brings, it's not really that great for World Boss Legend, since I was barely able to clear stage 35 with only a few seconds remaining. In Giant Boss Raid, his performance was much better with that CTP of Rage. However, I did end up dying in this particular clip because his ultimate is such a long animation that also moves your camera. So if the opponent uses one-hit mechanics, then you're pretty much going to end up dying, or you have to risk canceling your ultimate early and losing a lot of damage. Either way, I figured out that I was doing about 9 bars of damage every minute or so. So since I died with 9 bars remaining and 5 minutes left on the clock, I should have been able to finish the fight with roughly around 4 minutes left. That's actually pretty decent for a level 70 character on the combat advantage day with no artifact either. Because I couldn't really test anything else at the time, I didn't have access to Alliance Battle Extreme, I just ended up taking him to level 80 to see how his performance would improve. Like most other upgrades to level 80, the level difference and advantages that he gets from it allowed him to clear the same stage of Knull about 2 minutes and 30 seconds faster than before. Due to that upgrade and to get a better reference point when I take him to T4, I also did a stage 54 of Knull, and although I wasn't able to clear the stage, I got so close that I could say that he can basically clear it with no time remaining. If I had something like a better rotation or a slightly better build, like including his artifact, then he would definitely be able to clear the stage. By the way, for reference, when I say having a better build, I mean including things like Odin's and his artifact, since I'm currently just using mythic damage Urus and just a regular CTP of Rage. However, like I mentioned before, his performance with the CTP of Rage and World Boss Legend isn't really that great, since if you compare it to Venom, so if you watched my Venom video, I was able to beat stage 64 with him and a CTP of Rage with a minute left over, whereas Namor can barely do stage 54. There's also a little bit of a weird interaction or bug that occurs with him when you fight Mephisto, in that when that rage meter fills up, for some reason he can kind of cancel Mephisto out of it. As you saw right here, the meter starts filling up again when the pentagram part of the phase didn't even happen at all. It was just bypassed entirely. I'm not really sure how that happens. I've heard that it occurs when you use the second skill and he's about to enter that phase, but I can't really confirm that since I haven't been able to replicate it. Keep in mind that Namor does have a type disadvantage in this fight since he is combat and Mephisto is blast. However, thankfully all of his skills are tagged with cold damage, which is one of the elements that Mephisto doesn't have a high resistance to. Either way, at level 80 I wasn't able to clear this stage and finished with about 11 health bars left. And I have to say that the fight is particularly difficult because of Namor's long animations and because of the frequency of Mephisto's AoE effects and being able to hit Namor when he's in his ultimate. The stat bump for Namor at T4 isn't particularly great. He doesn't get too much HP or damage, but his base values are already pretty high, so with that T4 he ends up having pretty good ones overall. His instinct type is also Order, similar to Black Bolt, Storm, and Thor, so if you want ideas for strikers to use for him, I would probably watch the Thor video since I cover and break down all of the strikers that would be good for Order Instinct characters. Even with the suboptimal CTP of Rage, I was able to clear stage 54 once I got the T4 skill, and I found that Namor is very similar to Blue Dragon in that his performance isn't really that great at level 70 or 80, but when you do get his T4, his performance changes drastically. Similar to Thor's T4, all of his buffs get an increase in value of up to 20%, including the CTP, skill buffs, and even a CTP of Insight if there is one on the team. Besides this, he also gets up to 50% chain hit damage, which is massive because he can basically cancel all of the skills on top of one another, and because you can do that, you can activate the T4 skill very often and basically have nearly or very close to 100% uptime with the T4. With the T4 skill unlocked, I was able to finish the same stage as before, about 2 minutes and 30 seconds faster. From the testing I've seen from other players, it seems like CTP of Judgment will improve the clear time even more by about maybe 40 to 60 seconds, and even more so if you are able to reforge up to a Mighty Judgment. On stage 59 of Mephisto, Namor previously struggled to finish the fight, leaving about 11 bars when time ran out, but with the T4 he not only finished the fight, but did so with 2 minutes and 30 seconds left over. One of the other benefits I noticed on Mephisto with the T4 is that you not only have more health but more damage, which allows you to go past that second phase more quickly, where he is able to one-shot you when you're doing your ultimate skills, because again they are such long animations and he frequently starts spamming AoE skills that have burn effects on them and can really take out your health. You can also see the level of improvement in Giant Boss Raid, where I was able to clear the first phase in under 30 seconds and the entire fight close to 4 minutes faster than when he was at level 70. His rotation is pretty straightforward regardless of whether you're using a Judgment or a Rage. You basically do 5 and then delay cancel after the whale appears, and then you can do 4, cancel 2, cancel 1, and then end with the third skill since you need to stay in that skill a little bit to get the most damage out of it. Also note that if you are using a mighty CTP of Judgment, it does synergize pretty well with Namor's third skill, since you can basically move around and charge up that meter before going into your next rotation afterwards and getting the benefits of the top proc. When you have your ultimate unlocked, you do the same rotation, but then you use the 6th skill, or the ultimate skill, when you have about 2 seconds left on your proc. You mainly do this because the ultimate does have a gap in damage between the start and the end of it, so by proccing on the 2-second mark, you get the damage and the proc applying to the first part, and then the proc activating again for the last part. If you do have your T4, you basically use it whenever it's available. However, if you notice that your ultimate is close to being filled up and you do have your T4, you can wait a rotation to align it with a T4 and get the most damage out of the T4 and the ultimate skill combined. Although the character did perform suboptimally for me with that CTP of Rage in the World Boss Legend modes, in the ABX modes, on the other hand, he does excel with it. It seems that Namor was designed with the Alliance battle modes in mind, since he has Silence and Paralysis for those seasons in ABX, only missing Burn, and he also has Fracture and Snare for those Alliance battle Legend seasons respectively. The character has a lot of hits in his kit, which works really well with the T4 skill that increases chain hit damage. Most of my builds aren't really designed for high scores in Alliance battle modes. However, even with my current build, again not having Odins and no artifact, I was still able to score the max amount of 12 million in the no restrictions mode for Alliance Battle Extreme. And then in Alliance Battle Legend, I was able to score 5.8 million with the combat villain setup. However, if I did play it a little bit better, I'm pretty sure I could have gotten the 6 million mark, which nets you that important Uru chest that can potentially give you an Odin. You can also use the character in the no restrictions day, which I did with Valkyrie and Sif leadership, and was easily able to score past 6 million in that setup. Keep in mind that this is again with a regular CTP of Rage, so whenever the reforged one is kind of ironed out and I can see what it actually does, I can potentially go even higher with the reforged one, depending on how that works. I also took the character into PvP with that CTP Rage build, which I know is far from ideal, but it was more so to get an idea of the AI's rotation and to see whether the character could really do anything with that build. There are some decent things about the character that apply for PvP. He does have super armor, and he usually opens up with the 5th skill, which gives you invincible, meaning that even if you are running a CTP of Rage, you won't really get guard broken until the opponent uses something or some skill with penetration. He also has super guard break on his 2nd and 3rd skill, as well as healing on the 2nd skill, which he actually uses pretty frequently after the 5th skill. However, he doesn't really use his 3rd skill, and he doesn't really have enough damage from just spamming the 5th and 2nd skill. The 5th skill also leaves him out of iframe and completely vulnerable to attacks, so a defensive build won't really do much for him, and ideally you would probably want to use something like CTP of Destruction to try and proc off the 5th skill and possibly the 2nd skill to take out the opponent as quickly as possible. Either way, I wouldn't really recommend putting a CTP of Destruction on him, since his performance is subpar in PvP and you won't get much value from that in PvE. To give you some more insight on his PvP performance, I also did some Alliance Conquest tests, again with that subpar CTP of Rage, but again just to show you how his AI works and how much damage he can do with the 5th skill. As you can see, he does get the opponents quite low, but he does need the penetration to be able to go through their invincible and be able to kill them. In the first part of this clip, it looks like Namor did most of the work, but I'm pretty sure that Drax did, since in the second fight, you can see that Namor does end up dying pretty quickly, and Drax ends up kind of completing the fight. Basically, to summarize, if you are getting Namor's uniform, it would probably, if you want to use him in things like Alliance Battle Extreme and Alliance Battle Legend, since that's where he excels at, particularly with a CTP of Rage. However, if you try to use that CTP of Rage in other modes, he won't really perform that well, and you kind of need a CTP of Judgment for him to be sort of on par or nearly as good as some of the other characters that we've gotten, unless you take him to T4, where you won't notice the underperformance as much. In other words, you're basically locked into using a CTP of Judgment to make the character good for most modes, and you really have to T4 the character to see his value, very similar to Blue Dragon, how she isn't really that great until you get that T4 skill unlocked. So basically, if you don't have the character's uniform, the main real reason I would see that someone would want to pick it up is if they didn't get Storm's previous uniform and they need a mutant character for things like Dispatch and certain World Boss Legend modes, or if you're really into Alliance battle modes and want to get the top scorer for the combat villain days, which he will be and is meta in. On the PvP side, he has very little value whatsoever, so you're mostly just going to be picking him up for PvE. That is the review for Namor. He is a little bit of a mixed bag since you need particular builds to make him good in certain modes, otherwise he's not really that great, and you also really need his T4 to make him stand out from the rest of the roster. I'll be taking a look at Shuri in the next video, and then probably M'Baku and Ironheart in the same video, and kind of doing a little bit of a comparison between them, even though Ironheart can be transcended. I'm also really hoping that the mid-month patch gives us an upgrade to M'Baku so he can be transcended, and that we get some, maybe a synergy uniform for Shuri so she has more PvP value. And I really hope that we get a T4 Black Panther with an actual good upgrade for uniform. If you found the video helpful or entertaining, please consider liking, sharing with others since it might help them out, and subscribing since it helps me out. And as always, I appreciate you taking the time to watch these, so thank you. But the video is now over.